Hello, Sagittarius. I want to start with a question, and I want you to actually answer it before you keep watching. When was the last time somebody looked at you completely? Not glanced, not half listened while checking their phone under the table. Actually looked, the kind of attention that has nothing else competing with it, where you could feel physically that you were the only thing in the room that mattered to them in that moment. Sit with how long ago that was. For most of you, it's been longer than you'd like to admit. That's the actual subject of this reading, not the money. Although the money is real, and I'm going to walk you through exactly how it shows up. The deeper thing underneath the title is attention. Full, complete, undivided attention arriving from someone who has learned through years of being surrounded by people who wanted something from him exactly how rare it is to find someone worth giving that attention to. You're about to be that person. And I want to tell you plainly why it changes everything. Because it isn't the bank balance that does it. It's the temperature of being seen properly for the first time in longer than you can remember. I want to explain why this particular kind of attention matters so much more than money on its own ever could. Because the title's promise of wealth is going to be the part people focus on first. And it's genuinely the smaller half of what's coming. Money changes your circumstances. It doesn't change how it feels to walk through a room, or how it feels to speak and know someone is actually listening rather than waiting for their turn to talk, or how it feels to be quiet and have that quiet received as comfortable rather than needing to be filled. Attention changes all of that. And the specific kind of attention I'm describing here, full, undivided, unhurried, is something most people go their entire lives without receiving in any sustained way, regardless of how much money passes through their hands. You're about to receive both at once. And I want you to understand going in which one is actually going to matter more once the initial excitement of the title settles into ordinary life. Let me show you. Let me turn the first card there immediately. That's him, or someone very much like him. This is the king seated on his throne, coins arranged around him, a castle behind vines climbing the stone, a bull carved into the seat beneath him. Grounded, substantial, not performing wealth for anyone, simply living inside it comfortably, the way a person lives inside a house they've owned for a long time. I want to describe the specific quality of this person because millionaire in the popular imagination usually conjures something flashy, something loud, something that announces itself the moment it enters a room. That's not who's coming. This is quieter than that. This is someone who has had money long enough or built it steadily enough that it no longer needs to prove itself to anybody. He doesn't lead with it. You might not even know the full scale of what he has for some time, because he simply doesn't find it necessary to mention. What he does lead with is attention. Real, deliberate, unhurried attention. The kind that comes from a person who has spent years surrounded by people angling for something and has become, as a result, unusually skilled at recognizing the difference between someone performing for him and someone simply being themselves in front of him. That's the skill he's about to use on you. And I want you to understand what it's going to feel like when it happens, because it's going to feel almost uncomfortable at first. Simply because you're not used to it. Being looked at completely after years of being glanced at partially takes some adjusting to. I want to say something about the bull carved into his throne because it's easy to skip past as decoration, and it actually tells you something important about his character. That symbol represents steadiness, patience, and unhurried strength that doesn't need to rush anything to prove its own solidity. He isn't going to chase you or pursue you the way someone anxious about losing an opportunity chases things. He's going to approach the way this whole card approaches everything deliberately without urgency, secure enough in himself that he doesn't need speed to feel confident about the outcome. That patience is going to be tested by your own instincts because you're used to relationships that move fast or not at all. Attention that either arrives in a flood or doesn't arrive at all. His won't work that way. It's going to be steady from the first moment, consistent in a way that might initially feel almost too calm compared to what you're used to. Don't mistake that calm for a lack of interest. It's the opposite. It's what real interest looks like, once it's coming from someone who no longer needs drama to prove that something matters to him. Let me turn the next card because I want to know exactly why it's you. Yes, there it is, and this answers the question directly. This is the Empress seated among ripe wheat, a river running behind her, a cushion embroidered with the symbol of Venus beneath her, utterly at ease in her own abundance, needing nothing from anyone to feel complete. This is you. Or rather, this is the quality in you that's about to be noticed. I want to be precise about what this card is actually describing, because it's easy to misread it as being about beauty alone, and that's not quite it. This card is about a kind of fullness, a person who has cultivated something real in themselves, who isn't performing attractiveness or chasing validation, who simply exists fully in whatever room they're in. That fullness is magnetic in a way that performance never is. I'm being shown that you've spent a stretch of time without fully realizing it, becoming exactly this kind of person. Someone who has stopped needing external approval to feel whole. Someone who's built an inner life, substantial enough that it radiates outward without any effort on your part to make it do so. Here's why that matters, specifically for a person like the one in the first card. Someone surrounded by wealth encounters an enormous number of people who are extremely good at performing interest, performing charm, performing exactly the qualities they think will land. He's seen all of it. He's tired of all of it. What catches his attention now, precisely because it's so rare in his experience, is someone who isn't performing anything at all. Someone whose fullness is simply real, the way ripe wheat is real without needing an audience to confirm it. You are not going to be noticed because you tried harder than everyone else to be noticed. You're going to be noticed because you stopped trying. And that absence of performance is exactly what stands out in a life crowded with people who never stop. I want to say something about how this fullness actually got built, because it didn't happen by accident, and you deserve to hear that plainly. This kind of quiet, self-contained wholeness rarely arrives without cost. It usually gets built during a stretch of time when nobody was watching closely enough to give you the validation you might once have leaned on a period of being somewhat alone with yourself, learning slowly, that you could actually hold your own company without needing someone else to confirm your worth in the moment. That period wasn't wasted time, even if it felt that way while you were living through it. It was the actual construction phase of the exact quality that's about to be noticed. Every stretch where you had to be enough for yourself because nobody else was fully available to be enough for you was quietly building the foundation that now radiates outward without your even trying. You did the hard, unglamorous work of becoming whole on your own. What's coming is simply someone finally arriving who's capable of recognizing it. Let me turn the next card because I want to know how this actually unfolds between you there. And this is the heart of the whole reading. This is two figures facing each other, each holding a cup, extending it toward the other at exactly the same height. A winged lion's head hovering above them both. A caduceus rising between the two houses in the background. This is mutual recognition. Not one person elevated and the other grateful to be chosen. Two people standing at the same height, each offering something real to the other. I want to underline this because the title of this reading could easily be misread as a story where you're the passive recipient of somebody else's generosity, waiting to be picked out of a crowd. That's not what these cards are showing me. Look at the cups again. Both are being extended. Both are being received. This is an exchange between equals. And I want you to understand why that matters more than the money itself. A person with real means who has spent years being approached by people who wanted access to what he has, rather than access to who he actually is going to recognize immediately, whether he's being met as an equal or being treated as a walking bank account. The moment he senses the second thing, He withdraws not dramatically, just quietly. The way anyone withdraws once they realize they're only valuable for what they can provide. What he's going to find in you is the first thing. Someone who meets him fully as a person whose interest doesn't shift or intensify the moment the scale of his resources becomes clear. That steadiness, the fact that you'd have been just as present with him if none of it existed, is precisely what makes the whole thing real rather than transactional. And it's precisely what he spent years hoping to eventually find. I want to describe the winged lion's head hovering above the two figures in this card because it's an unusual symbol and it's doing real work here. It represents a kind of watchful protection over the exchange happening below a guardian presence, making sure the connection stays honest, stays balanced, doesn't tip too far in either direction toward one person getting more than they receive. That's a reassuring detail for a reading like this one because it tells me the imbalance you might be bracing for the fear that you'll somehow owe him something disproportionate for his attention, or that you'll be expected to earn your place in his life through some ongoing performance of gratitude, isn't the shape this actually takes. What's being protected here is equality itself. Neither of you is meant to carry more weight than the other in this exchange, and if at any point it starts to feel lopsided, that's a signal something has drifted away from what these cards are actually describing, not a signal you need to simply endure and adjust to. Let me pull a clarifier because I want to know what the actual feeling is underneath all of this. There it is. And this one is tender. So, let me channel it carefully. This is a single hand extending from a cloud, holding a golden chalice overflowing with water, 5 streams pouring from it, a dove descending with something small held in its beak. This is real feeling. Not calculated, not strategic on either side. Genuine emotional opening. The kind that surprises both people, a little because neither of them expected to feel this much, this quickly. I want to be honest about something here because it matters more than the romantic framing usually allows for. This isn't going to feel at first like the version of romance you've seen dramatized elsewhere. Dramatic, sweeping, immediately declared. It's going to feel more like relief, like something in your chest that's been held tightly for a long time, finally getting permission to loosen. That's what real emotional opening actually feels like when it happens to someone who's been guarded for a while, which describes you, and which almost certainly describes him too. Given how much he's had to guard against in his own life, the overflow in that cup 5 streams, not one tells me this isn't going to arrive as a single grand gesture. It's going to build in layers through small moments that each add a little more warmth than the one before, until you look up one day and realize the whole cup has filled without either of you fully noticing when it happened. I want to describe the dove in this image too, descending toward the cup with something small held in its beak, because it carries a specific meaning worth naming directly. It represents a kind of peace arriving alongside the feeling. Not the anxious, uncertain kind of romantic excitement that keeps you checking your phone and rehearsing conversations, but something calmer, something that settles rather than agitates. That's an important distinction, because a lot of what gets called romance in most people's experience is actually closer to anxiety, dressed up as excitement. The stomach-drop uncertainty of not knowing where you stand. This isn't that what's building here comes with its own quiet confidence attached on both sides. You're not going to spend this particular connection wondering where you stand. You're going to know steadily the way you know the sun rose this morning, even before you've looked outside to check. Let me turn the next card because I want to know how this becomes something formal. There. And I'm being shown this with real clarity. This is 4 wands standing upright in an open field, garlands strung between them, a couple in the distance beneath the arch. They form a celebration gathered around them, a castle visible past the trees. This is commitment made openly, celebrated by people around you rather than kept quiet or uncertain. I want to describe why this card matters so much in this particular reading, Because it's the card that answers the wifed-up energy directly, and I want to do that honestly rather than dance around it. What's coming isn't a secretive arrangement hidden from view, uncertain in its terms. It's the opposite. This is a bond made in the open, formalized in a way that other people get to witness and celebrate alongside you. The garland strung between the four wands is a threshold, something you walk through together publicly with people gathered on either side, glad to see it happen. I want to say something about the timing implied by this card, too, because it doesn't rush. The couple in the image are still approaching the archway, not yet standing beneath it. That tells me this unfolds at its own natural pace, rather than being forced into a hurried timeline. The recognition happens quickly. What it becomes takes the time it actually needs. And neither of you is going to feel pressured to rush past that process just because the initial connection feels this strong, this fast. I want to add one more detail from this card, because it explains something important about how the people around you are going to respond to this once it becomes visible. Look at the crowd gathered near the archway. They're not simply present. They're celebrating, actively glad about what they're witnessing. That tells me you're not going to have to defend this relationship to the people who matter most in your life. The way people sometimes have to defend relationships that feel wrong to everyone watching from outside. The people who genuinely care about you are going to see what's happening and recognize it as good without needing to be convinced. If anyone in your circle does react with suspicion or discomfort once this becomes visible, that reaction usually comes from a place worth examining honestly. Sometimes from people who are used to being your primary source of support and feel a little displaced by someone new taking on that role. Sometimes from people who've simply never seen you this settled before and don't quite know what to do with it. Give those reactions a little grace and a little time. Most of them soften once people see how steady this actually is. Let me turn the next card, because I want to know what this actually secures for you. There it is, and this changes the shape of your whole future, not just this one relationship. This is an elderly figure seated beneath an archway, coins arranged in the pattern of the tree of life above. A young couple beside two children, dogs at their feet, a castle visible in the background, generations gathered together under one roof. This is lasting security, not a temporary windfall, not a brief stretch of comfort that eventually runs out, but something structural, something that reshapes the actual foundation. Your life stands on for years to come, and often for the rest of it. I want to be specific about what changes, because rich in the title deserves more precision than the word usually gets. This isn't going to be the kind of money that arrives once and gets spent down over a few years until you're back where you started. It's going to be the kind that restructures the whole architecture underneath you. The kind where certain categories of worry simply stop applying to your life. Not because you become reckless with money, but because there's finally enough of a foundation beneath you that ordinary financial stress no longer has anywhere to take hold. And I want to point out the generations in that image, because it's not describing something that benefits only you. There are children in that picture, and an elderly figure, and a whole household spanning multiple ages gathered under one roof. Whatever is coming reaches further than your own immediate comfort. It becomes something that changes the trajectory for people connected to you as well. Family, the people you'll go on to care for, and children of your own down the line. This isn't a windfall. It's a foundation being laid that outlasts you. I want to describe the dogs in this card too, because they're a detail people often overlook, and they carry real meaning about the character of the household this is building toward. Loyalty, ease, domestic comfort, the sense of a home that isn't tense or performative, but genuinely quietly settled. The kind of place where the animals themselves seem relaxed because everyone in it is relaxed. That's the atmosphere you're walking toward. Not a showcase home built to impress visitors, but a real one built for actually living in. There's also a walled town visible in the background of this card, distinct from the immediate scene in the foreground. That tells me the security you're stepping into connects you to something larger than just the two of you, a wider community, a network of people and relationships that come along with this life rather than existing separately from it. You're not just gaining a partner and a foundation. You're gaining an entire world that was already built and being welcomed fully into it. Let me turn the last card because I want to know what this all feels like once it's fully settled. There it is. And this is exactly the right note to end on. This is the sun in full brightness. A child riding bareback with arms flung open. A wall of sunflowers behind. Nothing shadowed or hidden anywhere in the entire frame. This is what it feels like once the initial disorientation of being truly seen wears off and simply becomes your ordinary experience of being alive. Uncomplicated joy. Nothing guarded, nothing held back, nothing you have to manage or perform in order to keep it intact. I want to describe the specific quality of this happiness, because it's easy to assume a reading like this one promises constant excitement, constant romance, constant grand gestures. That's not actually what lasting happiness looks like, and is not what this card is describing either. Look at the child again, not performing joy for anyone watching, simply riding, arms open, completely present in an ordinary moment that happens to feel extraordinary because nothing is being withheld from it. That's what you're walking toward, not a life that constantly announces its own good fortune. A life where the fullness you've already cultivated in yourself finally has somewhere to land. Someone who sees it, meets it, and doesn't require you to shrink any part of it down to be easier to be around. I want to say one more thing about this card before pulling the reading together, because it's the detail that matters most for you specifically. Notice how young the figure riding beneath the sun actually is. This isn't a card about hard-won peace arriving only after decades of struggle, earned through suffering, and finally released. It's about something simpler and closer to the surface than that, a return to an ease you may have known once before. Life taught you to be careful with your own joy, to hold it in reserve, to keep some part of yourself guarded, even in good moments, in case they didn't last. That guardedness gets to soften here. Not because the world suddenly became a place with no risk in it, but because you're finally in a situation stable enough and with a person steady enough that the old instinct to brace against disappointment simply stops finding anything to brace against. That's what full daylight in this card actually means. Nothing left to protect yourself from, so nothing left to hold back. Let me pull it together. Here's your reading. Someone with real substantial means is about to notice you. Not because you performed harder than everyone else competing for his attention, but because you stopped performing entirely. And that absence of performance is exactly what stands out to someone who spent years surrounded by people who never stop. What he offers isn't one-sided generosity toward a passive recipient. It's mutual recognition between equals, each meeting the other fully, each offering something real. The feeling underneath it is genuine, not strategic on either side. And it builds gradually rather than arriving as one overwhelming moment. Layer after layer of small warmth accumulating until the whole thing has filled before either of you quite registered it happening. It becomes something formal, celebrated openly rather than kept hidden, unfolding at its own natural pace rather than being rushed. What it secures is structural, not temporary. A foundation that reshapes your whole financial reality, reaching beyond just you to the people connected to your life as well. And underneath all of it is an uncomplicated happiness, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself constantly because nothing about it is being withheld or managed. I want to say the whole shape of this once more cleanly before turning to the practical instructions. This isn't a story about luck striking you at random or about being plucked out of obscurity by someone above you. It's a story about two people meeting at the same height, each one having done real quiet work to become whole on their own terms. recognizing in each other exactly the qualities that took years to build and were never on display for anyone to see until now. The money is real. The security is real. But they're the visible edge of something considerably deeper being fully known, fully met by someone who finally has both the capacity and the character to offer that completely. Now, the practical part first. Stop performing. This is the single most important instruction in this entire reading, and I want to say it plainly because it's counterintuitive. Every instinct is going to tell you to try harder, present better, curate a more impressive version of yourself once you sense this attention arriving. Resist that instinct completely. What's being noticed is the real unperformed version of you. The moment you start performing, you replace the exact thing that made you noticeable in the first place. If you catch yourself editing a message 3 times before sending it, or rehearsing how you'll phrase something before a conversation, notice that as a signal you're slipping into performance mode. Send the first honest version instead. Second, practice receiving full attention before this arrives in smaller ways, so it doesn't overwhelm you when it shows up at full scale. The next time someone gives you their complete focus, a friend, a family member, anyone, notice your own instinct to deflect it, to make a joke, to look away. Practice simply receiving it instead. Let your eyes stay where they are. Let the attention land without immediately handing it back. Third, don't accelerate the pace once the connection begins. Everything in this reading describes something that unfolds at its own natural rhythm, rather than being rushed toward a conclusion. If you feel the urge to push things faster than they're naturally moving, out of excitement, out of fear, it might not last out of old habits around needing to secure something quickly before it disappears. Notice that urge and let it pass without acting on it. Fourth, meet him as an equal from the very first conversation, not as someone grateful to have been chosen. This matters more than almost anything else in this reading. The moment you position yourself as the lucky recipient of someone else's generosity, you shift the entire dynamic away from the mutual recognition these cards are describing and towards something closer to a transaction. Stand where you actually stand, as someone whose presence is being met, not granted as a favor. A useful test for this: notice your language. If you catch yourself thinking or saying, "I can't believe someone like him would want someone like me," gently correct it. That framing puts you beneath him before he's ever treated you that way. Fifth, let the people in your life witness this openly rather than keeping it quiet or private out of caution. The commitment this reading describes is a public one, celebrated rather than hidden. And trying to manage it secretly out of fear of jinxing it or fear of others' opinions works against the very openness this connection is built on. And 6, the one that matters most. Once the financial foundation settles, remember that it was never actually the point. It's the byproduct of being truly seen, not the reason any of this happened. If you find yourself months or years down the line focusing more on the security than on the person who gave you both the security and the attention that came before it, you've lost the actual thread this entire reading has been describing. Keep your attention on being seen, not on what being seen happened to bring with it. This is worth returning to periodically, especially once ordinary life settles back in, and the initial intensity of being noticed fades into simply being your everyday reality. Comfort has a way of making people forget what actually built it in the first place. Don't let that happen here. The attention was always the foundation. The money was only ever the visible proof of it. Okay, small favor. When you feel that specific shift, the moment someone's attention lands on you completely differently than you're used to in a way that makes you want to look away simply because it's unfamiliar, come back and drop the words "fully seen" in the comments. Just that, fully seen, because that's the actual event this reading has been describing the entire time, not the money, though the money is real. The specific, disorienting, eventually wonderful experience of being looked at completely by someone who has learned through years of practice exactly how rare that is to offer and exactly how rare it is to find. And tell me, if you're willing, when the last time was before this, that somebody gave you that kind of attention. Not romantically necessarily, just fully, completely, without anything competing for their focus. A lot of you are going to realize it's been longer than you expected, and seeing that answered honestly by a few hundred people is going to be more moving than either of us expects. There's something quietly powerful about a comment section built entirely around that one question, more than most other readings tend to produce. It's not people announcing wishes for the future. It's people looking backward honestly and discovering together how starved for real attention most of us have quietly been without ever naming it out loud. If these keep reaching you at the right moment, subscribe. There's more coming, and I want you here for it. So, here's where I'll leave you. I keep thinking about the question I opened with. When was the last time somebody looked at you completely? That question matters more than the title of this reading suggests, because the money was always going to be the easy part to believe. Money is concrete. You can imagine it, picture it, understand exactly what it would change about your life. Attention is harder to imagine, precisely because you've gone without the full version of it for so long that you've half forgotten what it actually feels like to receive. What's coming toward you is going to remind you not gradually and not subtly. You're going to feel the difference the first time it happens. The way you feel a room's temperature change the moment someone opens a door to somewhere warmer. And once you've felt that difference, once you know in your body what it's like to be fully seen rather than partially glanced at, you're not going to be able to go back to accepting less than that from anyone else in your life either. That's the real change. Everything the title promises, not the ring, not the money, though both are real and both are coming. The recalibration of what you'll accept going forward once you've finally experienced what full attention actually feels like. I want to leave you with one last thought before I go, because it's the piece that matters most beyond this specific reading. Once you know what full attention feels like, you stop being able to settle for partial attention anywhere else in your life, either, not just romantically. Friendships that only ever gave you half their focus are going to start feeling noticeably thinner by comparison. Family dynamics built around distraction and half listening are going to become harder to accept as simply normal. You're going to become, without trying, considerably more discerning about who gets access to your presence going forward, because you'll finally have a real standard to measure everything else against. That's not going to make you difficult or demanding. It's going to make you accurate, finally able to tell the difference between people who are actually with you and people who are simply in the same room. That skill, once learned, doesn't go away. It becomes part of how you move through the rest of your life, long after this specific relationship has settled into something ordinary and comfortable and no longer feels like news. Go be seen. You've been ready for this longer than you realized. I'll see you at the next one.